I competed in freestyle disco, which I don't think is a thing. In Princess Bride, where she gets kidnapped, I was like, I like this film. I would openly say, I want to be a stripper when I'm older. Where are you going? I'm like, off to do my dominatrix course.
Yes.
You know, I actually have a notes app on my phone of my favorite porns.
Hi, my name is Bree Mills, and I am a porn director with a purpose. Now, throughout my career, I have covered just about every niche, and I've created some award-winning films and brands along the way. But now, I'm much more interested in getting to know the real people behind my characters. And that's because I believe adult entertainers can be some of the most powerful role models when it comes to sex ed, consent, empowerment, and wellness. By asking the right questions, our community can really help people better understand themselves. So that's the mission of this podcast. Let's get up close. Gal Ritchie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. This is, it's our first time meeting.
Yes, it is.
And I definitely set this up on purpose because, you are someone who I know in even the short amount of time that you've been working, I keep hearing your name coming up and up.
I hope for good reasons.
Yes, for excellent reasons. And what I hear actually the most is just, how you've got so much to say and that you have a lot of really interesting perspectives on stuff, and that you're a great conversationalist. So I actually heard that from a few different people, and I thought, okay, so this is how we're going to meet.
Well, I hope I live up to it.
Yes, we shall see. If we both go radio silent, then we know that it wasn't true.
Cut.
But thank you so much for being part of this podcast. As you know, with Up Close in our new studio, it is all about showcasing female pleasure and, showing good, confident experience and identities. And that starts with having good conversations.
Yeah.
So I hear you're good at that. Let's start it off by telling me a fun fact about yourself.
Oh, I used to compete in dance for a good 6 years. That's a fun fact.
Okay, what kind of dance?
One. I competed in freestyle disco, which I don't think is a thing.
No, but I want to know.
But people imagine it. We wear crazy costumes.
Okay.
So imagine feathers on the head, tight little skimpy leotards, bedazzled everywhere. And then so I competed at that, and then I also did jazz, tap, contemporary ballet. Dance was basically my adolescence life.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I did was live and breathe dance. And then I quit when I was about 16. But yeah, I did that for a long time, and that's all I wanted to do. I had ideas of other things, but predominantly I was I want to be a dancer. This is what I want to do. Yeah.
Where did that start?
I had a really good influence from my grandma. She wrote a few musicals, small production stuff, but she used to take me to the theatre in London. It was my Christmas present every year. We would go to London and we would go see Wicked or Grease or whatever. And that was a major, I don't know, it put a light bulb into my head of, oh, this is really fun. And I didn't ever want to do it in a musical Broadway sense, but I loved watching people dance and express themselves through that element of creativity. It was really impressive. And then I actually had a teacher in my primary school who he came in for I think doing teaching assistants or something. And my mum would work really long hours. So I did breakfast club and after school club. And he was one of the teachers who would run that. And he was an amazing dancer, incredible. And he would just take me into when we would do the, I don't know, whatever, free time. We would just dance around the room. And I just have such fond memories of doing that as really young.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
And then that led to freestyle disco.
That led to freestyle disco.
Which I have to admit, I didn't know in 2023 was a thing. So,
yes,
yeah,
you have to. It's
up.
insane. It's really intense, dramatic music.
Yeah.
And then people doing crazy splits and flips and stuff. It's crazy, but it's really fun. But it's super energetic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it was great. I mean, I'm really happy I did dance, although now I don't really use it. It taught me from a young age. I had a very strict dance teacher, a lot of discipline, also like drive. Like if you want to win, you have to work hard. Like you can't just like show up and not practice. That's not how it works. And it was very like, you don't really miss rehearsal. So I would do like Monday to Friday classes after school. And then I would do like training for the competition on the Saturday. And then it's like 8 hours of competing on the Sunday and then I was going to school on top of it. And we would fake tan and have like crazy hair. So I'd turn up on the Monday like completely orange.
So you were like in the circuit from very early.
Yes. Yeah.
So tell me about what your upbringing was like, you know, in addition to the hard work and discipline and drive that you learned from an early age through dance.
So I was brought up by my mum by herself. My mum is like my favourite person in the world. She brought me up single-handedly while caring for an addict, and she got a PhD at the same time. So I really admire her as someone who was an amazing female person in my life. But I'm lucky enough to have a mum that's very open-minded. So she teaches art. She now runs an art course in a university, but she was doing performance art from like very young. So I would go to all these wacky productions of her like jumping in cake or like shooting a gun or getting a haircut, you know, just really weird stuff. But it was kind of like, she has the attitude of, as long as you're safe, happy and healthy, I don't care. Yeah. That's the priority. You do what you want to do. Like, she was always very accepting. I used to watch, I don't know if you know the film Showgirls.
Yeah, oh yes, yeah.
I watched that when I was younger and I was like, I want to know me.
I was going to ask you, you know, what some of your early pop culture references for sexuality was. So Showgirls, classic response.
It's an incredible movie. It's so campy. It's amazing. I love it. So I watched that when I was younger. And even like saying that to my mum, she wasn't like, go to your room, what are you talking about? She would then take me to feminist productions of like burlesque shows in London, or like she works at a university now, and people for their end of year performances do stripping, or some of them are sex workers, or they write their PhD about sex work and feminism and how that collides. And also like just took me to so many amazing things that made me feel like I could do whatever I wanted to do instead of going, close that door, go over there. Yeah. That's gross. Stop talking about that. She embraced it in a way that made me feel like I could do it if I wanted, you know, and it made me grow up really close with my mum. I can tell her anything, which is amazing. And it's a much safer way, in my opinion, to grow up than being scared to tell your parents anything. So you're probably going to do it anyway and not tell them. Yeah. And then if something bad happens, they don't know. Yeah. And then my grandma was, like I said, a really big influence in growing up. She is a very strict Israeli woman. And she's amazing. Like, she would look after me a lot when my mum was working long hours. And again, she would like take me to dance class, do all these lovely things that enabled me to go to dance or to go to competitions. She was the one that would take me all the time. So yeah, I'm very grateful, and I realise my privilege in terms of like having such open-minded family background. Some of my family less so, but the people that are very close to me, as like I said, as long as I'm safe, happy and healthy, they're not really too bothered, you know.
How did, do you remember some of those like early conversations regarding sex when you were growing up? Since that's something that a lot of people just don't ever have, and it can lead to a lot of challenges later on. So
I don't know how it is here. In England, we have like, I mean, I remember having one in like, we have primary school, which I don't know.
Or like elementary school.
Yeah.
School.
Yeah. So you have like your first sex ed talk there, but it's very, I mean, I don't remember much. It was some weird video that just makes everyone feel awkward and it's awful and probably black and white and like awful. Yeah. And then we used to have, what did we call life skills lessons when we were older in like the next school. But again, it was, I appreciate the trying of it, you know, like at least it's a conversation that's being had. Yeah. But it was done in a way of like, this is a dildo, put a condom on it, you're safe. You know, it wasn't like,
here you go.
It wasn't like, or like the stigma against like STDs was like crazy when we were younger, like in terms of like they would bring out like, it wasn't if you have sex, you're going to get this, but it's like, if you get this, you're going to die, you know? So, I mean, that was not a very fun conversation that was had in a lot of the lessons. Like, it wasn't like, if you get this, there's medication you can take, still be safe, but it's, you will. And also, I mean, a lot of girls in my school got pregnant quite early on. And then I think that's when they switched the conversation to, you have to wear a condom because otherwise you're going to get an STD and die. But there wasn't so much on the conversation of, I guess, well-being within sexuality. It was more like, we know you guys are probably having sex, so do it with a condom, which again, I appreciate it. I'm glad at least it's being spoken about, because I feel like, I don't know in the USA if that's even a conversation.
Not consistently.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least they're doing a little bit in that school at some point. There was a lot of like bullying in regards to like rumors of girls who like, oh, they've done this, they've done that.
Yeah.
I was one of the girls that had a rumor about me. A lot of slut shaming, like an insane amount. And I wish there was more a conversation that got in tune of women can do what they want with their bodies. Let's not call them whores, you know? Whereas it was like, there was no conversation towards guys, but the conversation was, if girls do go sleep around, you're a slut, you know, which is awful.
Well, and which is, it's a narrative that that echoes across sort of like so many different influences for women growing up, right? So there's this like almost like internal ingrained conflict that we are born with as women, where it's like you should not feel good about your sexuality, but your sexuality is very important, but it's very important to whatever guy is going to like capture it or like own it or whatever. And do you feel like, because you grew up with such sort of strong female role models who were open, you know, did you have conversations with your mom and with your grandmother about like those feelings you were having, or you still sort of kept it within yourself?
Definitely with my mum. I wouldn't say so much my grandma. I mean, in terms of the conversations, it would probably be along the lines of like, be safe, don't do silly things. I remember my mum finding out I had a guy over, and instead of being like really angry, the conversation was more like, okay, wait, did you use protection? If you didn't, And in our small little town, which is actually very good now, think about it, there's a clinic you can go to, and they see under 25 free STD, free condoms. They would come to a school and give out condoms, which is incredible. And like, it's a conversation people don't want to have because you feel uncomfortable about it, but teenagers are having sex. That is what's going on, whether you find that nice or not, it's happening. So it's better to have the conversation and, you know, let the teenagers know that this is the way to do it in order to be safe. But I remember like going to that clinic and having great conversations in terms of like, are you on the pill? This is what to do if this happens. And they would also check the ages of the guys that the girls are sleeping with, or vice versa, which I think was also great.
Yeah, a good way to add sort of just like an extra set of eyes and concern. Yeah.
So that was really good. So I remember that being a thing probably like halfway through what you would call high school. But before that, I mean, in terms of with my mom, I can't really remember having like a clear-cut conversation. I remember when I started my period, she was like, is this how you put tampon in?
Yes.
Yeah. But in terms of guys, just more like safety stuff rather than like making you feel bad about it.
Do you know that when I got my period, I was raised by primarily by my father, and he thought it would be a really good idea to throw a party for my period. And so he threw a surprise party and invited all his friends, and they all got me red-themed gifts.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I wouldn't. I did not love it at that. I was pretty horrified.
Like, yeah.
But it's a good story to say.
It is. I appreciate the effort. I can understand the thought behind it.
Yeah, there was some party planning. There was some definitely like a good theme going on.
Yeah.
So, not talking about my period party, but getting back to your sexual development and awakening. Do you remember some of like your earliest, you know, kind of associations with like your own, with masturbation and self-pleasure and, kind of some of how you ended up understanding who you were as you became an adult?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the specific first time like I masturbated but I do remember watching like, it's a really weird Disney film. I can't remember. I think this might be Hercules or something. Okay. Where they like tie up the girl. And I was like, oh, there you go. No, that feels weird.
Yep. Another pop culture reference.
Yeah. But I remember being quite like, I guess in tune with, I watched a lot of YouTubers growing up and a lot of female YouTubers. Some of them were sex workers. So they would talk about, female pleasure and stuff like that. So again, I had quite like an open conversation going on. In terms of my own sexuality though, yeah, I mean, mainly watching films when I was younger, I remember being like, ooh, especially ladies. I'd be like, ooh, naked lady. Ooh, what's going on?
Maybe it's almost like the reverse, like the slut shaming aspect of like, oh, I'm seeing her naked, like I'm not supposed to, right?
Yes, yeah, kind of like the ooh.
Yeah.
And then I would like, I remember we had a lodger in my house and I remember asking her how to spell naked and her being like, why do you want to know that? And I was like, no reason. But yeah, I would watch a lot of like, cartoons growing up and they made me feel a certain way, but I didn't quite understand that feeling. Same time when like, I think I first masturbated, it would have been like, I remember I went through a period of just like rubbing my thighs together and I'd be like, oh, that feels good. I don't know why it feels good, but it does. And it's really warm and nice. And that then turned into,
I want to rub my thighs together more.
Exactly. Yeah. And what makes me want to rub my thighs together when looking at things. And I would hump my pillow when I was younger, but I think that's like a lot of girls used to do that. Yeah. Because I remember speaking to my friend about it and she was like, yeah, I used to do that too.
Yeah. Humping the pillow and the like bath faucet. Those are two ones I've heard a lot
of. Yeah. Shower. Yeah. In the shower. Yeah. But yeah, the predominant stuff that would, I guess, arouse me sexually, I found later on to be like, I like being submissive, and that now I can understand through watching like a lot of, I wouldn't say suggestive, but things in order like the guy kidnaps the girl or like in Princess Bride where she gets kidnapped. I was like, I like this film.
Yeah, you like the idea of sort of submissiveness.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
No, I that's also something that, I was going to ask you, what was it about the Disney princess being captured? But perhaps it was because you wanted to be that Disney princess.
Yeah, I think so. I was like, can someone come and tie a rope?
Yeah, for my wife, it was like when Jasmine gets held by Jafar. But that was her like awakening moment, right? So that's what made me think. So what led you into sex work professionally? Tell us that story.
So like I said, when I was younger, I would tell my teacher, and this is kind of outrageous, probably sounds more outrageous than it actually was at the time. But again, I feel like England is a lot more like open-minded within schools in terms of like sex is talked about more. But I would openly say, I want to be a stripper when I'm older. I knew when I wanted to audition, what I wanted to wear. Like I had this big fantasy about I think I wanted to work in Vegas and become a stripper. And then when I was 18, because I didn't so in England, the school system works differently. So we have high school until 16. Then you need to stay in education, but you can do apprenticeships instead of going to full-time education. So I originally went to a dance school and then it got shut down due to funding. And I told even my co-workers the day I turn 18, I'm not working here anymore. I'm going to go be a stripper. And I ended up doing an audition for a club relatively near where I lived. Got the job, but I can't remember why I didn't end up taking it. I think I was researching other things and I came across cam work. And I was like, oh, this means I don't have to travel by myself because I didn't have a car. I don't have to travel by myself. I don't have to actually, I don't know, go into work, be in work, do night work. Because in my head, I thought I could do it as a day thing. The reality is you make most money at night.
Yeah.
But I joined an agency doing cam work. I really enjoyed it at the beginning. It was very new and shiny, and I'm a bit of a performer. So I enjoyed the aspect of I was watching myself on a screen and people are being like, "Ooh, do this." And I'm like, "Yes, I will." Okay. I really liked that aspect of it. But it got very lonely very quickly. And I am not a nighttime person. Anyone who knows me knows I go to bed like 8 in the evening. I wake up at 5. That's just my body routine. So when I had to start doing night shifts, it was difficult. So I quickly realized it wasn't sustainable. I then thought about doing dom work because at the time I had like pitch black hair. I would wear a lot of eyeliner. I got approached by a lot of guys who wanted someone who would boss them about, but not in like a motherly way, in a bratty way.
Yep.
And so I kind of played off that role of being a bratty schoolgirl. That was my thing. So I researched like, how to become a dominatrix. I found a course in London because not all, I'm sure, but most professional dungeons in London that you can rent, you have to prove that you have a certification if you're going to work there. So I found a course in London. I got my certification in professional domination.
Nice.
I remember like, because I didn't live near London, my mum would be like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Off to do my dominatrix course."
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And she embraced it in terms of like, it's something I was really passionate about. I get quite intense into something. So like, I really want to be a stripper. I will learn everything about it. I want to be a dominatrix. I will learn everything about it, you know? So I did that. I learned how to like, you know, hit people so you don't leave marks, But I quickly found out I'm not someone who's dominant.
Right.
So I worked as a dominatrix probably for under a year, and it really drained me. I felt like I was having to perform a character 24/7, especially when you do like really long bookings. And it wasn't, I mean, I worked luckily in dungeons that are pretty safe. They'd have security or cameras or whatever and panic buttons and stuff. But I had a few bad experiences where I was like, I've kind of got burnt out. I'm having bad experiences. And your reputation, I don't know if it's the same here because it's such a larger country, but in England, it's really small community. They all go to Torture Gardens, which is like a big dominatrix BDSM festival. Everyone knows everyone. So if you get a bad reputation of you've been rude to someone or unprofessional, or for right reason you've crossed someone's boundaries, whether that be a client or another professional, you will get blacklisted from dungeons very quickly, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But I found myself being a bit snappy with people, and I was like, I've had bad experiences. Now I'm starting to be, I don't know, I wanted to be careful in the point of like, you're in control. I don't want to fuck with someone else's consent and boundaries. So I need to step away before like I snap and I shout something nasty at someone, you know, because I've got burnt out and I can't deal with it anymore. So then I got a quote unquote normal job. I did recruitment in the tech industry for, my God, like a year and a half. I had like a relationship and then that relationship ended and I was like, you know what? I've always thought about doing porn. It's something where it mixes like the performative aspect of doing sexual creative stuff and the bit that I like, which is I can reach out and touch someone, or I can be in a room with someone and I feel their body heat, rather than where I found really lonely because I'm such a people person. Yeah,
well, and like, like you said, it once the sort of initial excitement of it wears off, then it is oftentimes you in your room for, you know,
God knows amount of time.
Exactly, like the whole day. And same thing with your experience as a dominatrix, right? Like when you're doing that role play, but you're doing it, you know, so consistently and for so long, if you do not connect to that character,
it's hard.
It becomes work pretty quick, I would imagine. Yeah.
So again, I did my weird intense, I'm going to research the fuck out of this.
Yes.
And I watched loads of podcasts, loads of documentaries, and Spiegler's name kept coming up again and again and again. And so I was like, who is this mysterious man?
And for those who don't know who he is.
Yes, Mark Spiegler is my agent. He is, in my opinion, the best. So yeah, he kept coming up time and time again. I'd hear his name. So I researched who he represented. And again, I think they're some of the best girls in the industry. So I was like, oh, this man seems important in this line of work. Again, let me do loads of research. So I watched, and I've told him this, so he knows I'm a stalker. I've watched every single interview that he's done. Every single one.
Have you seen The Patron of the Tarts?
I absolutely have seen that. And I've probably watched that about 5 times.
Yeah.
And I've shown it to most people in my family. That was one of the things of like, Mum, I want to move to LA. This is what I want to do. And this is the man I want to work with.
Yeah.
And she's shown it to my grandma. So that's how I found out about the world of porn. I know there is a industry in Europe that is big. But because I have an American passport, I was like, I wanted to at some point move to America for a little bit. I want to personally settle down in the UK. So this timeline of being in my 20s is when I want to be in America for. So I was like, why not utilize it? So I reached out to Mark beginning of COVID when he was in hospital. I spoke to George, and then my grandma and grandpa kind of needed me to be there. I was doing their shopping and stuff for them. I was helping my mum with a lot of things.
Travel wasn't exactly easy.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't really actually get here. And that was was going to swim, but it didn't work out. So I waited, did my, still in my job of recruitment, and then reached out again when all of that was slowing down. And I wasn't in a relationship anymore. And I thought, you know what, fuck it. This is the time where I have very little responsibility in the UK still. I have a dog, but I left my mum in like a state where I wanted to make sure that she has people she can reach out to if she needs help, because she's by herself. I just didn't want to be like, bye, figure it out, So I made sure like we had a dog groomer and someone who can walk the dog if needed, and, these things in place that enable me to move country. So I reached out to Mark and George, who works with Mark, if people don't know. He's also incredible. And that was a really you have to kick the door down with them, which I think is great. It stops people that aren't actually that interested in being in this line of work, and it's a bit more of a fantasy joining his agency, which I think is great. I really had to be like, hi, I'm interested. And I was so persistent. Like they would be like, oh, okay, we'll send some updated photos since you've reached out. Within an hour, they had photos of me, full glam, with a background. Yeah. And that was when I was working in London. So I was getting up at 5 a.m, getting home at 9. And I did university for a little bit, studying psychology. So I was getting back sometimes at 11. And I was still like, I will make the time. I will step out of the office, It became the priority is impress Mark and George.
Get a response, So
I did that a couple times, and it got to the point where they were kind of like, well, you're in the UK, we can't see you. Like I FaceTimed them a couple times, we got on, but they don't really know what I'm like. So I was like, okay, how about I front the money, I come to the to where Mark lives, I come to LA. If even I come there and you don't like me and I have to go home, it is what it is. I'd prefer at least to take that chance and come over here. Yeah. And he was like, okay. So I came over to LA in June. Luckily, I was liked, which is nice. Yeah, made the journey work.
You shot your shot and it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
And they let me join the agency, and I've been here ever since.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what have been some, now that you've been shooting professional studio content for a few months, what are some of like the things that you've learned that you did not expect to learn?
How professional things are. Like, because I did a lot of research, I was aware that like there are forms done and there's consent talked about, but not to the extent where we are at the moment. Like especially adult time, doing the consent talks and the sign-ins and stuff like that, which not every company does, is really, really special in my opinion. I think it's great. And the feedback forms you guys do is really cool as well. That and how like every day it is, which is really nice. Like you feel not like a weirdo on set. It's like someone's talking to you and there's just someone naked over there. But I really love that. Like it normalizes it massively. You know, some guys just like jerking off in the corner.
Chatting with you about
and it's great. It's really nice. And it makes you feel like way more comfortable on set than like go in that room, get naked, then come out and there's cameras and no one talks to you. Like it's like you have lunch and then you talk and you chat. And I really love that. Like I didn't expect it to be like that at all. And also, I mean, I didn't know what the other girls would be like in the industry because where my experience is when I did dance, there's a lot of cattiness, it's a lot of competition. Everyone's kind of nice to each other, but they all kind of hate each other. Here it's, from my experience that I've had so far, everyone has been lovely. There's not like a sense of competition in terms of like when you're on set, everyone treats everyone nice and fair. I've had the most hilarious conversations ever on set. I was belly laughing the other day with Kenzie Taylor. It was amazing.
Yeah, she does invoke that.
She's
people.
So
Shout out
funny.
to Kenzie.
Yeah, love you, Kenzie. So yeah, I didn't expect it to just be so, you feel so normal and not like in this weird industry. And also you shoot in fantastic locations and there's studios. I was imagining like you go to like some weird warehouse and you're in a tiny box room and there's a mattress on the floor. Not like you go to these beautiful houses and like wherever, or these studios with great setups, and the amount of crew as well, which I mean differs set to set, but it's a much bigger industry than I thought. And again, I'm in the Mecca, we're in the Valley, so it's massive here. But like in terms of like so many behind the scenes jobs that I didn't even think about within the industry.
No, and you spoke about the community aspect as well.
Yes.
I think one of the things that, and it's interesting to get your perspective on this as a newer talent in the industry. One of the amazing pros about, you know, having a community of essentially freelancers, which is like kind of like what we all are, is that you do have to kind of band together, right? Because there's not a lot of infrastructure otherwise. So that results in people really like, you know, having a greater tendency to help someone out. Certainly, I think it's grown to become like that. But at the same point, you know, the fact that there isn't, you know, like a formal onboarding when you join porn, right? You know, like what to put in your set bag. What is, you don't use the fluid in that douche, you know, like all of those things.
Kenzie also taught me that.
So you really do need to rely on the people you're around to get the advice that you need. And that's where I thought it could be quite interesting, you know, as a subject of this podcast to kind of share that advice out, because like women at large also could stand to, you know, to get some of the advice that those who are thrown into the fire get. So like, what have you learned about your own body and sexuality and sexual health over the last few months?
Lots and lots and lots, probably like more in the last 2 months than my whole entire rest of my life. I mean, in terms of sexual health, getting tested is so important. Even if you're not a professional, you're not in the industry. Like I'm kind of shocked at how I used to treat sex a little bit. In terms of like, I wasn't always the safest. Getting tested is crazy important. Every time you get a new sexual partner, you probably should get tested. And if I feel like it's so weird because people see porn as like so dirty and disgusting, and it's cleaner than like the rest of the world. I'm safer to go on set than I am to go home with a guy after a club or a girl, you know? So in terms of sexual health, getting tested and also understanding my vagina.
Yes, which she's a complicated gal.
She really is.
Yeah.
And probiotics and how to keep your pH fine, because it turns into like a thing that's kind of like, I'll deal with it. It's your career now, so you have to be on top of it.
Yeah.
So Chanel Cameron told me these amazing vitamins that now I take every day. When I get a UTI, what to do, or even early stages of stuff like that, I can catch. Whereas before it's just like, kind of suffer and deal with it because you don't. And if you ask people, they don't really know either. Like my friends at home you don't really know or whatever. I had big problems with going to doctors in the UK. I personally think a lot of them aren't that on board with female health. I think if you go to the doctors as a male, you get treated much better than a woman. You're kind of just told to shut up and deal with it, or like you're being dramatic. I get told a lot of the time. And I used to get a lot of really bad UTIs. Whereas now it's like I can have these conversations with people who have the advice they can tell me. And it's crazy that health professionals don't know, you know, and people in the industry do. I mean, it's great we do, but it should be equal. You know?
Well, all the more reason to talk openly about it, right? Yeah. I have also learned more in my career in porn than I ever learned outside of it in terms of like anatomy and how things work and what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
You mentioned the professionalism of sets and you know, the importance of like those consent conversations. And that's definitely something that's like a big, you know, a big focus for us on sets. But one of the real things I've learned too is as we as an industry have really embraced that and really made it the bedrock of our on-set experience, just how little it is discussed in the civilian world and just how important it is. So what, maybe you can share a little bit about what, maybe if any influence that you've had from like, you know, having to really, you know, make it, you know, a part of the conversation before you have you know, sex with a partner. What advice would you give for people in their own civilian lives who don't feel confident to be able to have those kinds of conversations?
I mean, in terms of confidence, it's difficult. You have to step up and have the conversation, as horrible or as hard as you imagine and embarrassing it is to have the conversation. You have to have it. Even in depths of like, if someone's like, yeah, let's fuck or whatever, it's like, yeah, maybe go into more detail than that. One thing I really like on adult time is it's not just like, oh, it's like, oh, I'm happy to be slapped, right? Where, how hard? You know, it's never just that cut and dry, which I really, really like. And I think that should be definitely brought over to civilian life in terms of like, when I was like starting to explore stuff with like BDSM and being submissive, I would meet up with people and try and explore it. Never in a million years would they sit down and be like, okay, so if you like this, how hard and where, you know? And it should be especially more part of the BDSM community having those conversations. I mean, I'm not saying I was doing it in a professional manner at all, you know, but it's crazy how not in depth the conversations are. I don't even think like growing up and starting to have sex, I had ever had a conversation of consent.
Oh yeah, no, same thing for me.
Never.
Like it was, it's something that just, you know, you're like, okay, you're into like you're still doing it. Okay, like okay, I guess that means we're okay, right? Yeah. No, it boggles my mind that it just was not part of our instincts, but like how important it is.
And that again comes down to like it's not being talked about in school.
Yeah,
you know, and if I was luckily enough to have an environment being brought up that my mum talked to me about consent in terms of like kind of like if someone does something to you, tell them no and get out there and call me and I will deal with it, you know. But in terms of like people that don't have that environment at home, it should be compulsory in school, I think, to have consent conversations. And now think about it, that's something that was lackluster. In the conversations we had about sex education. Never would they talk about consent. It was kind of just like, don't rape anyone.
Right, yeah.
That's the conversation, full stop. We've sorted that tick box.
Yeah.
It's not, this is how you start to bring up a conversation of consent. This is how you have the conversation of consent. And also, after you've had it, if someone says no, it still means no.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, which again, just because something is a yes at the beginning of the conversation, once you've had sex or when you're having it, doesn't mean it's also a yes.
Yeah.
That's something that I didn't even really think about, you know, until I was in the industry where it's like, yeah, this is a yes list, but it's not subjected to always be a yes list.
Yeah.
It's how you feel in the moment and that can change and that's okay. That should be way more prevalent in the civilian community.
Well, and it goes above and beyond sex education too, right? Like it's just sort of like a really important aspect of social education.
Yes.
You know, I mentioned that I've got 2 young kids and like, you know, just even at that age, just understanding how to interact with each other.
Yeah.
And but we talk a lot about consent in my house, and I'm telling my daughter, like, oftentimes, like, you are not consent, like, you are also breaking someone's consent. Like, it really goes both ways, right? Because, you know, it's something that is it's a really critical skill, but you're not necessarily going to be getting it from an outside source. So, you know, one of the things that we want to do with the studio is really sort of showcase people's yeses and showcase that, you know, genuine female pleasure. So, you know, you've probably shot for a good number of different projects now. You've got a good taste of the eclecticness of porn. You know, I would ask with up close as a studio, what do you kind of think about when it comes to like the aspect of focusing on female pleasure in adult content?
I think it's really important. I think how people perceive porn is definitely male gaze wise. I also think there's a conversation to be had about, God, this might be a bit controversial, but so-called feminist porn. I think when you name a certain type of porn feminist, it makes, like for me, for example, I like quite hardcore porn. That is not deemed feminist, but then should I feel guilty because I enjoy it? Yeah. I think having a way more open view on female sexuality, that it can be so many different things. It's not just it needs to look like this in order for it to be feminist. Yeah, it doesn't need to have soft lighting and a really you know, romantic story. No, a glossy overview, and it doesn't need to be a certain script and a certain narrative for it to be about female pleasure. I think that conversation isn't had enough either, to be honest. Because when I started researching porn, or like when I started watching porn, the overriding feeling of guilt of like, oh God, you know, am I a bad feminist? Do I not care about female rights because I like certain things in the bedroom? And feeling guilty because of that is crazy. You know, it's insane. It's that slut shaming coming back again and again in different ways. So I think having a conversation is really important about the broad aspects of where female sexuality lies, and pleasure is involved in that as well. Is super important. So having a podcast like this is great. Yeah. What nowadays, what kind of porn do you watch? Have you hit the point yet where you recognize everybody in all the locations? I'm close to it, and that's crazy to say. I've only been here 2 months, but the other day I was like, oh no, okay, no, not that one. In terms of porn I watch now, again, I'm fairly versatile in terms of what I like. I can do hentai and love it. I can do like really like kink, for example, like BDSM stuff, or like really amateur passionate stuff as well. I really like. Depends what mood I'm in. I actually have a notes app on my phone of my favorite porns. So when I'm like, I'm on the 10th page and I'm like, none of this is really getting to me, or I'm now starting to recognize everyone, I'm like, we'll go back to the index. Okay, I gotta ask, do you remember what's at the top of that list? Yes. What's at the top of that list? It's the first proper porn I probably watched. I mean, I don't even know if it's out there because I haven't watched it in a long time, if it's still around on the internet. But it was a female gangbang. It was great. Foursome gangbang, I don't know. And it was about a girl who, like, she's in bed and she has this fantasy of waking up, and these women come and tie her up, and they put like tape around her legs, and they like, basically, it's kind of like forced masturbation, forced orgasm stuff. It was incredible. I don't know who was in it. But you enjoyed it very much? It was incredible. So that's right at the top. And I have very, very vivid memories of like that being the first porn I ever watched. Yeah, which sounds like, in a way, not exactly like the Disney princess, but kind of, right? Like just a more adult version of that, right? So there you go. The cycle continues. My last question for you, Gal, is for any women who are watching or listening to this podcast who may be very much stuck in that cycle of not knowing how to talk about how they feel or express themselves. What is your best advice for them? It's a very good question. I think don't put pressure on yourself to be like, I need to know I like this, and I need to know that this is the box I fit into, because you probably don't fit into one. take the time to watch stuff and understand yourself. I think also there's so much still stigma. Don't be embarrassed if you don't know, you know, and if you need to kind of like re-virginalize yourself in terms of like, oh, I want to try this out, and have those conversations with your partners. This is something I'm interested in trying. I might fucking hate it.
Yeah.
But I might love it. And you won't know until you try it. That's kind of how it is. I think also like putting a priority of understanding your body and sexual aspects of yourself is really important. And it can feel a bit selfish, especially as a female, because sex is kind of seen as a male thing, that it's for their pleasure, and they're the one that come in reproduction, so they're the ones that have to have the pleasure. No, that's false and it's not true. Be selfish and take the time to be like, oh, I like this, I don't like this. Take the time to research things.
Yes.
Like take an afternoon and be like, today is my porn afternoon or my erotica afternoon, if that's what you prefer, you know. Give yourself time.
And be persistent when there's something that you want, right?
Exactly. You have to. You have to
right,
ask
Mark
for it.
Spiegler, many, many times.
Exactly.
Well, Gal Ritchie, it has been amazing to have you here. What a great way to get to know you. I know we're going to be seeing a lot more of you. You know, like I said, all I've heard is good things. And after speaking to you today and hearing about that first porno, it sparks a million ideas, which we can't talk about on here, but we can talk about afterwards.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening, for watching this conversation I had today with Gal Ritchie. Even though Gal has just been in the industry for a couple of months, she had so much good advice and insight to share, and I can't wait to get to know her better. If you also enjoyed Gal, if you enjoy the mission behind this podcast, if you want to support us, please make sure to do all the things, the likes, the comments, the subscribing to our channel. And you can find all of our socials located in the episode description below if you want to get to know us even more intimately. So until next week, let's keep it real. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you, everybody.